How to install your pump. It's a question humans have been asking themselves since the dawn of creation. But fear not, we ventured into the deep to find the answers and demystify the process. Pumps may include electrical, pneumatic, and mechanical components that may be hazardous to your team. Installation and maintenance must be performed by qualified personnel only. Please also make sure you're following all of your facility's safety, lockout, and tagout procedures. The pump should be located where there's a compressed air supply, access to the controls, and space for changing material containers. There must be sufficient overhead clearance to allow the ram elevator to be raised and lowered during container changes. Each pump has a different maximum height you should be aware of. They're on the screen now for you to take note of. Some options will impact the maximum height of your pump. The portability kit, for example, adds about 4 inches. Once you've determined where you're going to place your pump, it's time to connect the air supply. Use an air hose or pipe with a 3/8 inch or larger inner diameter to connect to the air in port on the lockout valve. The supplied air pressure should be between 60 and 120 psi. Air pressures higher than 120 psi are not recommended and may damage system components. Once your air is connected, it's time to connect the power. When handling electric components, make sure you're following all your facility's safety guidelines to prevent electric shock. Different controller options require different types of power. Options 60 and 61 require 120 volts of AC power. Option 70 requires 24 volts DC connected to the controller. Pumps that do not come with a controller may have devices that need to be connected to your machine's 24-volt control system. For more information on connecting your pump's electrical, refer to the electrical schematic. After your pump is properly connected to air and power, it's time to load up the material. If your material has any type of curing property, we'd recommend following the steps in the second half of our container change video for more information on how to deal with trickier materials. That video goes into more details about installing a new container, so if you find yourself stuck after watching this one, we'd recommend checking that video for additional tips. Before we can install a new container, the inductor must be moved to its highest position using the ram up lever. Next, you can load the container onto the pump frame. Using the ram down lever, lower the seal so it rests on the top rim of the container. Check to make sure that the seal overhangs all sides of the container equally so that the container is centered below the seal. If needed, adjust the container position so it's centered. Once the container is centered, you'll need to prepare the inductor for bleeding the air out by removing the handle and opening the inductor vent valve. It can be helpful to place paper towel by these openings to collect any material that bleeds out. When you're ready, lower the inductor into the container using a feathering technique. When a solid stream of material is coming out of the handle port, stop the movement of the inductor and reinstall the handle. Once it's tightened, continue moving the inductor down, this time watching for material to come out of the inductor vent valve. Once the material coming out is free of air bubbles for a few seconds, close the valve. At this point, your container shouldn't have any air in it. However, we still need to bleed the air out of the pump. Make sure the ram elevator is in the down position and turn the pump on by pulling the button or turning the knob, depending on what regulator stack your pump has. Place a container or rag under the pump bleed valve before opening it. Once the valve is open, you should start to see material flowing out. When the material has been airless for a few seconds, you can close the valve. At this point, your pump is ready for action. To simplify the container change process in the future, adjust your container locators. Loosen bolts that hold the locators and slide them down so they are in contact with the edge of the container. On dual post pumps, this is an important step because the locators prevent the container from being lifted as the elevator is raised. In general, this adjustment will help ensure the new container is loaded into the same position each time. Now that your pump is functioning, let's go over some of the main functions. The pump air pressure relief valve is factory set to relieve air pressure higher than recommended, which limits the material outlet pressure. The air pressure relief setting varies according to the pump boost ratio and is not needed on some lower boost pumps. A pump regulator adjustment above the relief valve setting will cause the valve to open. If you see or hear air escaping from the relief valve, reduce air pressure on the regulator. Do not remove or readjust this relief valve. The pump's air pressure should usually be above 30 psi to keep the pump cycling reliably. The main air inlet lockout valve controls air to the regulator assembly and allows for a lockout of air to the pump and ram controls. The main shutoff is the lockout point for air pressure. The pump shutoff valve only controls air to the pump's air motor. The ram elevator compressed air regulator should be adjusted to provide enough ram down force to keep the pump from cavitating. 30 psi is a good initial pressure setting. Higher pressure may be necessary with thicker material. Thinner material may require lower pressures. If a material oozes past the inductor lip seals in the container, the pressure is too high. The solenoid valve allows the pump to be controlled by a PLC. The ram elevator control valve directs the movements of the pump inductor. The lever must be down while the pump is operating. Okay, wow, that was a lot of information. If you want any more, go to our website.